Welcome to the Joy and Goal Setting Podcast, where we empower individuals to discover their purpose, achieve their goals, and experience a joyful life through encouraging conversation. I'm your host, Hudson Dodds. Today, we're sitting down with Tejbir Dhindsa, who is an ER doctor in Charleston, South Carolina, and is currently pursuing his master's in business from Duke. We're going to talk about how he got here, where he's going, and how that aligns with the person he wants to be. Tejbir Dhindsa, welcome to the show. We're so happy you're here.
Thanks for having me.
So I know you. We go way back, but our guests don't know you. So I'd love to kind of help them get to know you a little bit. So why don't you tell us where you're from, where you went to college, and what's your favorite book you read this year and why?
Sure. Like Hudson said, my name is Tejbir Dhindsa. I'm born and raised in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. Currently, I'm an emergency medicine physician serving at Roper Hospital at all 6 of our locations. And the last question was my favorite book?
Favorite book this year and why?
That's interesting. This is probably not what you were looking for, but I'm a sucker for biographies, specifically, usually not autobiographies, because I think they're usually self-serving. However, I read Matthew McConaughey's Greenlight, which was incredible.
What'd you think? Yeah, pretty funny, wasn't it?
It was very funny. People had really sold me on the audiobook aspect of it, but I had already bought it on Amazon, unfortunately. So I read the book and was very pleasantly surprised, one, about just the way that the book read and listening to his story and really finding that he is a character in himself on screen, but he's very, very introspective, which you would think most artists are, but he's to another degree. I didn't realize that he had completely reinvented his career, which I think a lot of people think about from time to time, but he actually did it when he was already successful. So I thought it was completely enlightening.
So you're an ER doctor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, why did you get into medicine? Was that from a childhood desire? When did you know I want to go into medicine?
So I don't know if there was any epiphany moment. A lot of people can talk about times they saw friends or relatives sick. I think it was a culmination. I had a lot of exposure to medicine from a young age. My mother's a physician. My dad's a researcher. I've got a lot of friends and family in it. I kind of drew an interest to it when I was in college. A lot of my friends are all physicians now, but we were all on the same track. I went to Emory. Sorry, I forgot to answer that question earlier. I went to Emory University in Atlanta, which is essentially a pipeline for business school and medical school. I didn't realize that at the time, but it was. And I started gaining more interest in it, applied to medical school, got in, came back home to Charleston, and decided on emergency medicine because I never wanted to be the guy who's on a plane who they say, we need a physician, and you say, I'm sorry, I've been doing skin for the last 40 years and I can't help you. I'm a dermatologist. No offense to dermatologists, but when I think about being a physician and your role and your dedication to a community, I think you want to have a very wide spectrum to what you can treat and what you can attack when you think about disease processes. And that's what drew me to that.
That's awesome. So I'm curious, when you decided at Emory, I want to go to med school, was there ever a moment in time you felt yourself say, I want to go to med school so that, obviously be a doctor, but I want to be a doctor so that, or if you didn't have that kind of moment, looking back, what would you say subconsciously was the answer to that question?
This is a little bit of a wider question for me because I wanted to do this because of a sense of community. And it really comes back to stepping back. My parents, both immigrants, coming to the U.S., and there was always this interesting dichotomy for myself growing up, where my parents tried to assimilate me into a community completely foreign to themselves, but preserve their culture. So doing so, I really felt extremely involved in the community because they raised me along with my parents, right? You know, a lot of things my parents can teach me because it just culturally wasn't in India. I mean, American football, easy one. My dad didn't know how to play American football, didn't know anything about it. I learned it on the back of Sullivan's Island with Kit Regnery. I mean, it was an amazing experience growing up in Charleston, and I felt like I went into emergency medicine to help take care of the community that raised me.
So you're helping the community. You're an ER doctor now. You have a baby on the way. Congratulations.
Thank you. 7 weeks. But pleasantly naive, as I like to say.
Almost a dad. Finished your first term at Duke, working towards your MBA. So you are, in a lot of ways, people look at your life and say, man, Tej is on like cruise control at this point. He's married. He has an awesome house in Mount Pleasant. He has a baby on the way. Steady, incredible job as an ER doctor. And now you're going to get your MBA. So talk to me about how that process happened. Why MBA? What's going on with that?
So the MBA is an interesting thing because it's something I've always wanted to do. I actually looked at some MD, MBA programs when I came out of college. And I have always wanted to develop the business aspect of my life. I feel like it's probably something I would probably say I'm probably more innately leaning towards business than I am medicine. I just happen to like both. I've had a couple good role models. I think that's an important thing that is really not talked about as much. And one of my great role models was actually a family friend of mine. He's a pediatric cardiothoracic surgeon in Philadelphia. He got his MBA, and he was very influential on me, especially when I was in college, going through this time of trying to figure out who I wanted to be. And he was always very adamant that I try and seek higher education in the business world, especially with medicine becoming more business related. So I had been in practice, made partner 2 years ago, and I told Victoria, that void that I think some of us feel when we have these aspirations when we're younger and we don't fill them. I was coming to that point where I said, I think there's something more out there. And luckily, I feel very fortunate that Victoria is very supportive of me, because we're also taking on quite a bit of a financial obligation with it. But we decided to apply. Was fortunate enough to get in, and 3 months in now, I've had an incredible experience. I've met some amazing people. Really, I think whatever industry you go into, you end up hanging out or only talking about that industry, right? And I'm sick of it. I'm so sick of medicine talk. But all you talk with is, if you talk with other ER doctors, you talk about medicine all the time, your patients, et cetera, et cetera. When I started this program, it felt like you were in college again. And you were, 18 and the world is green and you're meeting people from all different industries, all different walks of life. And it's okay to ask dumb questions. As we get older, you have to be a little bit more quiet when you're around people in other industries because you don't want to sound dumb, or you're not really sure what to ask or what's even interesting, right? It's like if someone comes up to me like, oh, you're in the ER, you must see some crazy stuff. Yes, of course I do, but that's not the interesting stuff that you would think. So it's been really, really amazing. And I now have a good, close group of friends that I've met, and it's a very open forum. And we're all talking about this. We always wonder, are we insatiable? Right. And I think that's a tough thing to really figure out. Is there a difference between greed and being insatiable, or is wanting to change a bad thing? And I don't think it is. So it's been a very positive thing for me so far. Granted, I have another 2 years.
So you said that if you were to kind of put medicine on one side, business on one side, a business might kind of eke out medicine in terms of desire. So do you see yourself in medicine long term? Do you see yourself potentially in business in some ways? Is that undecided still?
Yeah, I think it's pretty undecided right now. I'd be dumb to give up the sweat equity I've put in to medicine at this point. I still really enjoy my patients. I really enjoy serving the community, especially if I see someone I know. The issue with the emergency room is people are completely vulnerable. They're there because they have nowhere else to go. And especially when they see someone they know, they feel like there's an invested interest. And I want them to feel that. It gives me a lot of sense of self-worth myself, knowing that I'm able to help these people because I have a skill set. Now, the lifestyle of a physician is pretty taxing. We're not always playing golf, even though we do quite a bit. But weekends, holidays, if hurricane comes, it has no bearing. I have to be here. You'll miss kids, birthdays. I'm trying to get time off for my own child to be born. So it's very tough because of our commitment to the community. We've really put the burden on ourselves. That being said, I'd like to balance that by still keeping up clinical duties, but having some sort of business entity that's on the side that I can run and kind of develop a different part of my brain. Because some people get to exercise it when they own their own business in medicine. With my group, we're not able to do that as much since we're dependent on a hospital infrastructure. But I still think that there are other either medical adjacent or even outside of medicine business opportunities out there that would be very enticing.
So I'm hearing two things. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but it sounds like potentially you're looking for some options where the work-life balance meets your ideal life, right? Mm-hmm. And there's this sense of maybe is there something more out there? There's something, it sounds like you're enjoying what you're doing because you feel like you're part of the community, you're giving back to the community. But at the same time, like it isn't quite what you maybe hoped it would be for you. Maybe it isn't quite as satisfying as you hoped it might. What might be when you were first getting into it in college, whatever it might be. It sounds like it's not quite living up to what you maybe hoped it would be. Is that right?
Well, I think I've always had this perception where I don't think anyone is supposed to have the same job for 10 years in a row, right? I think everyone should be able to switch industries, completely change what they do. You only live once. I mean, I'm surrounded by death every day, and I can tell you a lot of people feel unfulfilled. I want to have the opportunity where I maximize my potential. And sometimes I asked Victoria this, is there any benefit? When I go to business school, what am I looking for? Am I looking for just to have something on my CV, which I try not to think that's the reason. Because at the end of the day, I could work my job, be, stable financially, provide my family and upcoming child a good life. But it's not, going back to this, not the ideal life. So what that is, I don't know. I think finding out the path to it, I think, is always the goal. One thing I've always tried to do is ask myself, what's the easy thing to do? What's the hard thing to do right now? And doing the harder thing is usually the right thing, even though it might suck. But I think that's kind of what's led me to this right now.
Yeah. So if you'd be willing to, I'd love to dive a little bit deeper into in that thought of choosing a career or choosing a goal and aligning it with our framework, with the I got this framework. The I there is the ideal. And so what we talk about is when we align our goals with who we want to be when, like you mentioned it, kind of like when we die, like at the end of life, if we could look back and say, this unachievable goal, but it's something that if I lived exactly how I wanted to be, then that would be the ideal version of whatever life role we're talking about. So it could be work, it could be family, like you've mentioned those two things. You look back at those at the end. If we work backwards then as we set up our goals, if they align with those, that when we achieve them, we aren't left with the dopamine high that then is gone because we've achieved something just to achieve. But if as we achieve them, they line up with who we want to become, there's that lasting impact of joy. And you talked a little bit about that as you set a goal to be a doctor to help with the community because that's who you are. You're a communal person and you love people and you love helping people and you love giving back. And so there's joy there, but there's something else. There's something missing, whether it's out of medicine or not, but there's something else there. And so I think it'd be interesting, if you're up for it, to kind of maybe give this a go and think about exactly that. So if you were to look at yourself when you're on your deathbed, or even, the next generation looking at great-great-great-grandfather Tej, how would you want to be remembered as it pertains to, maybe we could do two, because I've heard both. I think there's kind of families coming up, so that's important. And then work. So we'll start with work, because we've been there a little bit, but what are some things that you would want people to say about you? Like as a eulogy, they were just like, Tej, as it pertains to his work-life role, as a whatever, he was what?
If you had to boil it down to one word, I would hope giving would be very high up there.
In what way? So like giving time, giving energy, giving knowledge, or does it consume all those? Like, what do you mean by giving for work?
If it's pertaining to work, I hope that someone would say that he was a good leader. Now, I know that's a very vague terminology, but I think it is somewhat all-encompassing on certain characteristics. I think that's probably what I would, if you boil it down to a single word when it comes to work, that's what I would hope to be. Now, the question is, what is that work? I don't know. If you ask me what my dream job is in 20 years, that's a difficult one to say.
And I don't think we would need to do that.
Yeah.
I think if we just think about, not even as one word, but just like things, like let's say that I'm standing up and I'm talking about you to people that have never met you at the end of your life. And I can say, Ted, and you would never achieve this. This is something you could never achieve. It's perfection. It's the perfect work life you had. You were what? Were you someone that that mentored other people to where they could reach their full potential? Were you someone who invented things that have never been invented that bettered mankind? Were you someone who, does that make sense?
Yeah. So I think that ideally I'd be able to bridge some of the gaps in the healthcare system with hopefully my upcoming business background, whether that's to more of the impoverished side or in the socioeconomic sphere or not.
Let's go even bigger. So what would that look like? Did you win Nobel Prizes doing that? Did you?
I don't even want to win that.
Did you change the way that healthcare across the globe was utilized? Like think bigger than you could possibly think. Like ultimately, not just achieving something, but this is unachievable, but would be perfect for you. Like if you could, it'd be perfection.
I don't know if I have a great answer for that. One thing that comes off the top of my mind, just with conversations we've had before this, would be that anyone who needs any aspect of healthcare, especially if it's emergent, that they don't ever worry about a dollar, right? That is that universal healthcare, I guess. Where that money comes from, I have no idea. But if you can figure out a system where you can take out corporate greed, whether that's pharmaceuticals or insurance, and let physicians be physicians, treat people, let them not worry about it. A lot of people that I see, unfortunately, delay their care because they're worried about the financial burden that they would incur when that things could be preventable. So in an ideal world, if you could see people and treat people appropriately without having to worry about financial burden or any issues related to that, I think that would be a pretty ideal sense. Now, is that something I'm going to do? I don't know. Is that something I want to do? That could be cool, but that sounds like quite the mountain to climb.
And that's the point. That's why it's the ideal. It's ideal. It's not going to happen. But so we start there, right? And then what we do is we'd move backwards and say, okay, if you let's that was a crude way of doing it. We would spend more time, but sure. Like if the goal, if you were someone, they said Tej was someone who was so selfless that he spent his time working so that other people would never have to worry about money spent towards healthcare, and physicians could do their jobs and enjoy them and have work-life balance, and you drug that out right a little bit more, then now we could begin to kind of see some patterns going on. And the patterns that I'm seeing are there's a desire for people to not have to worry about, one, their funds, and specifically as it pertains to healthcare. And then in the healthcare world, like it's changing a system, which is massive. But now you start thinking about, well, what does that look like from a business standpoint? Well, you can begin to kind of slowly start moving back and say, okay, well, in my 80s or when I have grandkids, like, where do I want to be with work? Where do I want to? What is a dream goal?
At 80, retired hopefully.
Because you've done what?
Yeah.
Because you now, whatever.
Building the infrastructure, I mean, I think a lot of that comes around policy, right? So that would be something that you would have to start with. Now, that being said, I think there's a lot more brighter minds than my own who've already attacked this. But like you said, it's hopefully chipping away at that rock of inertia when it comes to that system. Yeah, I think I'm not sure where you would even start when it comes to that.
Well, it sounds like policy is a big space you just mentioned, right? Like you would need to have done something. You're going in a way that is not just working in the ER every day.
Yep.
Right. And so now you take the step back and say, okay, in 3 to 5 years, in order to get to there, where, or even 10 years, what do I need to be doing? And you can say, whatever. Maybe it's I need to, as I'm looking now at my MBA afterwards, it is lining up with something that's more in politics, or maybe it's in the world of I don't know, doctor, the medicine, and
Definitely
business, how they work together, and you do. But I think now you can take a step back and say to get to there, and now you say, okay, well, today, like in the next year, while I'm in med school, start thinking about, and you do this. I mean, you're incredible at thinking about what relationships do I need to leverage, but if they're leveraged towards the end goal in mind, not towards the next year or 3 to 5 years in mind, now you're aligning yourself with who you want to be. So what we don't want to happen with any of us, and many people probably feel very similar to you in the space of, mid 30s, and everything seems to be going well, or maybe even not. And it's like, well, what do I do now? I'm kind of stuck. Do I jump ship? Do I not jump ship? Even if I don't, what do I do? And if the goal is not aligning with who we want to be at the end of our life, then the next 10 years, 5 years, it's in the same boat, because we're not satisfied with who we are, because we're not becoming the person we want to be. We're doing the things we thought we wanted to do. And so what I'm hearing in there is a sense of, like you said from the get-go, it's community. Like you have a great sense of purpose and community, which I would say is probably your value statement. Your value for work, as it pertains to work, is like community.
It's interesting when we had moved to Louisville, as you know, for residency for 3 years, came back in 2019, and we had a very purposeful discussion, Victoria and I did, about we're back in town. This is where we want to live. This is where we want to die. We want to get involved, but what does that look like? I mean, obviously I'm involved in high school stuff, as you know. But what I actually did, which was very beneficial, is I looked up the 35 under 35 or 40 under 40, I can't remember what it was, in the Charleston City paper for the last 4 years. And I didn't pick any of the ones that I thought weren't going to be super interesting. No offense to them, but I picked people who I thought were creative, and mainly in industries that had no relation to me. And I met some incredible people. One of the people I met through that was a really young guy who's the second in command, or the CFO, I think, of the African American Museum. And it's funny, he took this meeting, and I think I'm 4 for 4 or 5 for 5 on meeting with people through this. And when I was emailing him, because I cold called him essentially, and he could not, for the first 20 minutes of us talking, figure out what my angle was, because I think he thought that either I was requesting money from him or I needed something from him. And what I told him is, I don't need anything from you. In fact, I'm probably going to lose money because I'm probably going to end up donating to your cause. But I want to meet interesting people. I want to meet people that will widen my spectrum, that will widen the gamut that's out there for me. Because like I said, we're so insular especially when we come back and you're just in that one mode of what you do. You don't really expose yourself to other people. I can tell you there's a lot more interesting people than people in your own industry, especially because they just think differently. What they deal with on a daily basis, what you deal with, are completely different. And I think getting involved with them or understanding their paradigm is essential to really feeling the human connection more broadly.
Yeah. 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 And I think your desire for learning, your desire for learning from others, and your desire to therefore teach other people, I think is innate in you. It's who you are. It's that community aspect. I'm curious to hear from you on how do you think that's going to play into being a father? So family obviously is community, but it's the closest knit community you can have. Yeah, I'm just curious, like how do you see yourself jumping into a whole new realm while in med school, while being an ER doctor, or while in your taking your MBA, and then you add in a little one. How do you see your desire for community playing out as a father?
Well, first and foremost, I'm going to be a very proud girl dad. But I've got good friends who've raised amazing children like yourself, who I'll probably be calling every once in a while and saying, how do you deal with this? What do you do? And I've actually asked you that question. I told you one time, I said, I think you've raised incredible children, and how do you do it? I'm hoping you'll give me the key at some point. I had a good friend of mine tell me that he was, 6 months ahead of me in pretty much all our major life goals or accomplishments when it comes to being married and having children. And every time he's told me that your paradigm changes. When you're young, when you're 20, 25, you're very egotistical. Everything is about you. Even if you're not selfish, just inherently, when you think about yourself, you're thinking about yourself. What am I going to do today, right? That's what you wake up and say. From what I understand, and even now with having a wife, I've already seen my paradigm changes. What are we going to do, right? When you have kids, what are we going to do? And that gets bigger and bigger and bigger, depending on how many people are involved. I'm sure it's going to be a harder balance. I think it comes down to support, and I feel very supported at home. It was funny, the only caveat that my wife said before I started school was, okay, I don't want to be pregnant when you're in school. I said, sure. And of course, 3 months into me starting school, we're going to have a kid. So I guess that's just how life goes. But there's no easy time. There's no easier time than the present. I don't know if this quote really fits, but I was just thinking about that just now. David Goggins, who I'm sure you've read a lot about, he would fit well in this podcast. I read his book, not The Hurt Locker, it's called something along those lines. He has a really good quote in there that says, you don't rise to the level of your expectations, you fall to the level of your training. And that's something that I always try and strive to, because we all want things. Everyone wants something. We all have friends who talk about what they want, but they don't do anything. And unless you actually strive and fail, you're not going to get anywhere near it. So maybe I'm in my trial and fail series right now, but I'm hoping it'll gain traction at some point and something productive will happen.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting quote. We talk a lot about deliberate practice in our framework, and the difference between deliberate practice and comfortable practice is you add in a coach who can help you see your wins and failures. And as you said, when you fail, it's only a failure if you don't do anything with it, right? If you fail twice, then it's a failure. But if you take the failure and you grow from it, that's a growth mindset. And to deliberately practice something, like you said, it's the doing. We can all talk about things, but when we put it down on paper and we do it, when it's physically there and we can see it and someone's holding us accountable, it's very different. And that's that deliberate practice aspect. And so I would imagine, as someone as busy as you are, you probably have quite a bit of practices to keep yourself on track to keep yourself going. I'm sure that you sometimes you hit them and sometimes you fail, but I'm curious, what are some things you put in place to help you achieve what you've achieved so far and continue to be a husband and a friend and make time for all the things that you love to do still while still going towards your goals?
I think it comes down to discipline, right? Knowing what the right decision is and being cognitive of it. So every morning I try and do the same thing, make my bed. I'm a good boy in that sense. I always like to get put back into a made
Win
bed.
the day with your bed.
Win the day with your bed. But, I'm not perfect by any means. There's plenty of times where I'll go, weeks where I just completely feel like I'm, in a whirlpool, just spinning around, not really getting anywhere. One thing that routinely has helped me is simple as just putting your daily tasks on a piece of paper first thing in the morning. If I do that, I have a better sense of what I need to achieve, and I'm better at time management. Now, that doesn't happen all the time. And some days, with scheduling, if I just got off nights, not this morning, yesterday morning, it's hard to really try and seize the day. But that's a small thing that I've seen pay dividends. Other things that I do is I read the Daily Stoic. I feel like that is well publicized, really nice book to give you more of be more cognizant about your day in its relation to greater humanity with different titles and themes, which are nice. Now, when it comes to balance, I probably now, just thinking about this, should be better about categorizing my daily tasks, making sure that one always involves my wife, one always involves my child, and then I have my own personal, if it's paying bills or, going to the DMV or whatever that is, just so that I can knock it out, but be cognizant of different entities as well. I try and be, it's funny, Victoria, I never read it, but she read the book that was, What is Your Love Language? And it's funny because I learned from her what hers was, which I think is more important than her knowing what mine is. And hers was the time spending aspect. So I always try and be cognizant of that, especially in the afternoons when we go on golf cart rides and walks with the dogs. And that is much more important than us going to some fancy dinner.
So you've achieved a lot in your life, in many aspects. Do you feel like there's been times where you have set lots of goals at one time and maybe achieved none of them or some of them? Or do you find yourself as someone who tends to set specific goals around, sounds like a lot of work we've talked a lot about, but I know you're a whole person, so there's lots of other things, all of our other life roles involved who we are. But do you feel like, where are you on the goal setting side? Do you tend to set most of your goals on work? Or do you find yourself setting your goals around other areas of your life?
I would say probably more in other areas of my life. When it comes to work, medicine takes forever for you to train. And once you're in a practice, usually the partnership, as opposed to law, is very short. So make partner in 2 years and you're kind of done. And so you're all of a sudden you're 31 and you're like, okay, is this it? And some people, like I said earlier, are completely fine with that. I'm not. So I tried to really figure out what my goals outside of work are. And that's pretty difficult because there is no rubric, right? That's the tough thing, is this, you can go anywhere with it. If you had a good mentor, which I think we're all still striving to find, I think that usually helps because they give a sense of rubric where they're able to bounce stuff off. Fortunately, my parents have been that for me, as well as some people in the community. When it comes to those types of goals, I think I have some short-term goals, and then I have long-term goals that I don't think are necessarily feasible, but I just think would be cool.
Give me one.
Being the president of a college. Something I've wanted to do since I was 18. And the reason is because I feel like they get to deal with so many cool different aspects. They get local politics, state politics. They get young minds who are green, who are really forming themselves at a really interesting transitional point in their life. You get camaraderie of a university. You have sports. You have general academics as well. You're also managing essentially a company, although it's under a university name.
So hold on. You told me not long ago in this conversation that if I asked you what your dream job was, you'd have no idea.
Well,
And then you told me since you're 18 that your dream job has always been the president of a university.
I think that I may have misspoken about. I must have misunderstood your question initially. I thought when you were saying earlier, you were saying, what is an unattainable thing to do?
Oh, for sure. But you still said, I don't have a dream job.
I might have said that. I didn't mean to say that. I think I do have a dream job then. I
And
also
that's it.
think another cool one would be a U.S. ambassador. That's also something I've always wanted to do. I actually looked at joining the Foreign Service when I'd finished residency as being a Foreign Service physician. But the only issue is you don't get to pick where you go.
Well, I looked at being an ambassador. It's an impossible task, by the way.
Pretty tough. Yeah, I mean, I would be like stationed in Djibouti, and I don't think.
You're smart enough. I'm not. I could never pass the test.
Yeah, I don't think I could either.
It looks wildly impossible. So wait a minute. So you're going to school for MBA, and you've already told me secretly on accident that you want to be the president of a university. Has that not crept into your mind while you've been going to school at all?
Yeah, I don't know if school will give me any higher leverage, if you'll say, to go down that path. I will say it is pretty interesting if you look at who the heads of universities are. A lot of them are not career academics people. I mean, you look at Glenn McConnell, president of CFC, or former president of CFC. He went through politics, lieutenant governor, and then came over. President Sue, he was more academic. I think he's an engineer by trade. And then jumped into the academic sphere and quickly came over. But I always thought it'd be a very interesting job. I don't know. Again, I think that's a tougher one because there is no general rubric for it. But I think it would be an amazing opportunity. One I don't think is generally feasible for me at this point. But if the job application comes open, I'd probably be the lowest on the list, but
No, but that's perfect. I mean, that's where, with the framework, what we would say is that could be a 20-year goal, right?
oh, I mean, yeah,
A
at least.
30-year goal. So that's like the perfect thing to then say, okay, if that's a dream job, which for work would be like what we call a dream goal, like is exactly that. It's probably something you won't attain. But if you work towards it, whether you attain it or not, are you going to become the more like the person you want to be? Yeah, because you want to do community. And all the things you just mentioned are exactly the stuff that you want to be involved in. And so then you take a step back and say, okay, in 30 years, I want to be the president of fill in the blank college. Then in 10 years, what do I need to be doing to achieve that? What goal would I need to hit in order to have that happen? Let's play it out. What is something you think in 10 years in order to be the president of a university you might need to achieve?
I think you'd have to, an easy answer to this would be you'd have to be a dean in some entity, right? A dean of, whether it's a medical school or a college or some subset within. I think that would give you some validation and at least put you on that career path. How to get there, I don't know. I don't know how to make it a jump from private medicine to jumping in there. I also don't think that's 100% necessary. I'm trying to think of other ways that you could do it. Attend a lot of CFC basketball games. I think
we do that.
If you show who you are in the stands, I think they'll do it.
Look at the tap.
Yeah. Hey, you want to come in? Come into the C-suite. Yeah, I don't know. So if let's say 20 years from now, if that was my goal, this is the difficult part for me because I think a lot of people who are in medicine or the military, they look at life as a tiered system, right? I go from rank 1 to rank 2 to rank 3 to rank 4. When you have people who are outside of it, who are in a more nebulous space, whether that's, let's say you sell insurance or you're in private equity or whatever it is, there's a little bit more nebulous status of how do I get to a spot. So it's difficult for me to develop that part of my brain right now to say,
right,
how do I get there if there's not a set path?
Yeah, well, like you said, it seems that to be a president, you need business acumen. You need to understand
School spirit.
politics in some way. School spirit for sure.
School spirit.
And you need to understand how schools work, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been involved with the high school forever.
Mm-hmm.
Have you thought about getting involved in Duke while you're in school or Emory? You need to understand school. You need to have business acumen. You need to have politics of some aspect. You need all the areas you mentioned. And then you think about between now and then, what are some of those things that you should be getting involved with? Obviously, you're getting MBA and making the leap from medicine to business world, whether you stay fully in medicine or part-time. If that's the goal, you're going to get out of medicine at some point anyways, right? So there's some step you're going to have to move.
Well, I think I'm already kind of a little bit in that transition right now. I've taken my, I've probably gone down 30% in my work this year, partly because of school and having a kid and whatnot. But other reasons are because of my obligations outside of the hospital, which provide me no financial benefit. In fact, I end up, like I said, donating money to these entities. One of them is the Gibbs Museum of Art in Charleston, which is an amazing museum with incredible leadership and incredible board members as well as constituents. The other is the high school. So at Porter, I'm currently the alumni board chair, president, whatever you call it. And that fills a lot of the void about wanting to get involved in community, et cetera, et cetera. And I think, once that term is done, I would like to look more at getting involved, whether that's Emory or Duke or whatever. I think that would be a nice next step. I've looked into it a little bit, getting involved with the alumni office. We've actually got an upcoming event in a couple of weeks at the African American Museum. So I'll probably pick some people's brains at that point and try and figure out, how can I be of service? What can I do to help?
Yeah.
Because at the same time, nothing you should do should be for your CV or completely self-serving. You want to serve these entities. How can you help? It should be mutually beneficial. So I got to figure out how can I help with those two entities, because I don't think Emory has a very big presence in Charleston. Duke, I think, has more of a national pull, but I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. And so, what we would do is we would do a little more deep dive into figuring out what are the next kind of potential steps. And it sounds like there's already a few kind of percolating there that would make sense. Obviously, a jump into business makes sense. And then what we'd say is, okay, but not just business. Let's think about what business would make the most sense. That one, you'd have, passion for and joy, but it's going to help move you towards the presidency.
Well, I think, like we were talking about earlier, developing and failing, you have to start anywhere. And right now I'm actually looking at starting a consulting company, a medical consulting company. I can't obviously talk a lot about it right now, but just to try and figure out how do you start a company? How do you start? Where do you begin? That always fascinates me, going back to the biographies. You have all these people who are super famous, have done really well, have what we view as complete lives or ideal lives. But what were their points of change, right? Because, even look at who you started college with. First day of college, you were all technically the same, right? Or even in medical school, whatever. There's the plasticity within where I said this at school, where if you're, think of it as a bouquet of flowers. And right now we're all at the stem. We're all the same, and then we'll jump out. So you can jump out any different ways and you'll bloom in different ways, but how? What was that change? So I think starting, I don't know what type of business to get involved in per se. I have some ideas of what I'd like to start just from a self-development standpoint of trying to answer this questions of jumping into the unknown. Like I said before, where in a lot of people who are in military or in medicine, it's A to B to C to D to E. And now there's not that rubric. So how do you just jump in and figure it out?
Yeah.
I think that will teach me a lot about myself and what to do and more importantly, what not to do.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly, we don't have a rubric for how to get the next job. But what our aim is to have a rubric for when we set those goals to make sure they're aligned with who we want to be, so that whether you become the president or not, but as you move forward with your MBA and as you move forward with your business life, when you do achieve that goal, you can look at it and say, yeah, that is helping me become a person that could be the president of a university, which means I'm going to care about community, which means I'm going to care about policy, which means I'm going to all the things that you've mentioned you mentioned all those things in the very beginning about as an ideal work role. You said all those things, and it fits right into the presidency, which is funny to me. It's like it is the exact next step beneath that. So whether you hit it or not, you're becoming the person you want to be, which is why you take great pride and joy in meeting with people, which is why you take great joy in learning from them. And I think it sounds a lot to me also like you love imparting knowledge.
I don't have much to give.
No, I would disagree. And that's like the teaching side. That's the school side. And I think that's why it seems like that's why you're drawn to colleges. You're not drawn to be the president of a company. You're drawn to be the president of a university that is all about teaching and imparting knowledge and bettering the community, which is exactly like medicine. But it sounds like you see school as the best way for you personally to have the greatest impact. Because like you said, at the end of your life, if you were able to change policy with medicine and all those things, that very much aligns with that dream goal of being a president of a university. So I think that's super, super cool.
Maybe I should just go knock on the president's door, go to CFC.
I think that would be a great next step. How'd you get here? What do you recommend for someone who has these desires?
Yeah, and I think it's really important to do that, especially when you're young, because asking those questions to people who are in those seats that you want to be in, because one, people like to talk about themselves, right? They like to tell their story, especially if they're successful. But it helps give you an idea of where to go. And obviously things are dynamic and things are changing and it may be difficult or, might be a one-off on how they got to their spot. But surrounding yourself with those people will definitely help give you a better chance at figuring out how to get to where you want to be. Nothing is more frustrating than wasted potential. And I hope that we all try and maximize ourselves every single day, even though that can be tough. But I think setting those larger goals and realizing that just like when you're setting a course for going across transatlantic, right? It's not a quick change here or there. It's slow changes back and forth. That'll get you there.
Well, and you mentioned it briefly when you said when you getting into school, and starting school was super exciting, and that feeling is the pursuit of the goal. Mm-hmm. When you achieve the goal, when you achieve graduating from Duke, it'll be exciting, but it'll almost be less exciting than when you were first starting and running towards the goal, right? And that we know, obviously, the chemicals that are released of goal pursuit, and that's why it's so important to make sure that the goal isn't just to graduate, which I know it obviously isn't for you, but that it's so that you can X, so that you can do Y, so that you can become the president of a university, so that you can impart, your college can change policy so that people can never have to worry about how they pay for healthcare. And if you achieve that or not really isn't relevant. I mean, you want to, but what's relevant is that you're becoming the person you want to be along the way, and you're impacting millions of people throughout the process, which is super fun.
That would be an ideal situation. Watch nothing happen now. I think that would be. It is very interesting when you talk about goal setting, because it's just trying to figure out where to start. It's never an ambition issue, I think, with people, because everyone is ambitious to some degree, but how far they want to take it.
Yeah, and we feel stuck sometimes. Yeah. I don't know where to begin, and I think that oftentimes, like Olympic athletes are a great example of this, where it's obvious where they want to go, but then it ends there. It's not so that I could be what, so that I could be healthier, so that I could, swim with my children and their children and their children. That's why I'm swimming, in the Olympics. It's just to win the gold medals, period, end. And then what? And I think it's the same thing we talk about with work is very similar. So we get stuck in this mentality, but then even if we have the dream goal of since 18, I want to be a president of university, well, what do I do today? Mm-hmm. And then you work, as we've worked backwards, we would continue working backwards to say, all right, let's set up a habit today that would help you become that person that would be a president. And that's gets you out of the, where do I start? I mean, anything very small. Like you said, make your bed, right? Well, what's a small step? I'm not doing that today, but that will be kind of the idea is what habits would you need in order to be president that you could begin doing now is how we begin.
I wonder if that would be, in this situation, just really getting, at least early on, one of the first things I would probably do if I had, well, I guess that is a goal now, that I'm more cognizant of is setting up more discussions with people. Just making a attempt every day or every other day of setting up a meeting on my days off and just saying, hey, can I pick your brain?
That's exactly right. And that is exactly right. And that's a task that you would never want to stop, right? That's a habit that you would create that you would never, and that's the deliberate practice piece that you would do on a weekly basis where it's not much time, but what we find and have found that when you do that on a weekly basis, your brain rewards yourself because you're becoming who you want to be. So all of a sudden, the time to spend with your wife is opened up because you're more joyful. You're thinking about who you want to be, not in a self-egotistical way, but now all of a sudden there's that extra moment. You find more joy in conversation. You find more joy in work. You find more joy at home with your wife. You find more joy in all of those areas because you're pleased with yourself.
Well, it's funny. I think we all forget about benchmarks, right? Remembering where we were at certain points in our life. I think life is happening in front of us in the same way you might not remember or notice that your kid has grown 6 inches, but your cousin who comes into town is like, whoa, Huddy's looking big, And you're like, oh, I guess he's grown. I didn't really notice it because I see it every day. Interestingly, people always ask who the 3 people you want at your dinner table, right? One of my answers has been, I would like my dad at my age. My dad is much older than I am, obviously. He's had me when he was 48. And he's pretty reserved. Doesn't really talk about what he was like when he was younger. And when I was 23, no, maybe 22, my mom gave me a journal. And so I write in there about things I'm dealing with. It's not like an emotional journal about, I broke up with whoever. It's none of that. It's what am I wrestling with at that time in my life. I write in it once a month, and it's usually not super, super long. And it's funny because now when I'm a third of the way through this journal, I will look back at a year ago even, or 5 years ago, and it's so interesting to see where I was mentally. It wasn't like depressed or anything. I was just trying to figure out like, oh, I don't know what I want to do. Or, and now I look, and I had this conversation with one of my friends recently. I said, if I told you 5 years ago, if I told this, let's say for myself, I would say, hey, Tej, in 5 years, right now, let's say it's 2023, so 2018, I was in residency in Louisville. If I said in 5 years, you're going to be back home in Charleston, couple miles away from your parents. You're going to live in a beautiful house. You're going to have a beautiful wife. You're going to have a little girl on the way. You're going to be at the number one job that you wanted, and you're going to be in business school. I would say, wow. But if you don't look at benchmarks and you just see yourself now, you're like, oh, I'm insatiable. What am I doing with my life? I need to figure out something, yada, yada, yada. But we don't look at the progress we've made because we don't set those benchmarks or really talk about what that benchmark is at any point.
That's exactly right. And that is where you have to set those timely goals so you can celebrate them and work towards them on a daily basis and celebrate the wins or the failures and celebrate those as you change and grow. But you're right. If you're not, then you can never celebrate. And we constantly just live in a hamster wheel of where am I going? because you have never had a benchmark to say, I've reached this now because it's helping me go towards the next one. Correct. And the next one and the next one and the next one. And it's not to simply achieve the goal like we talked about, but celebrating those things is super important. But if we never set them up and write them down, we can't celebrate.
What do people, when someone achieves a large goal, if someone climbs Kilimanjaro, does anyone ever talk about the view from the top?
It's always about the climb to get there.
Yeah, that's all they talk about. And that's what we strive for in life, right? We complain about it like anybody else. Gosh, that's really tough. Or, man, this is hard. Or, God, I don't have any time for this. Or, yada, yada, yada. 5 years later, you're like, man, that was tough, but the process was amazing.
Yeah, the pursuit.
You do major kayak trips or do whatever. No one says, man, how'd you feel when you get there? You more talk about, man, that must have been tough during the travel. And you're like, yeah, it was hard as heck, but it was awesome. And I would do it again. Well, maybe not, but...
Well, Taj, it's been a joy to be with you here today. I can't wait to see where life takes you. And, when all I'm asking is when you become president of the university, don't forget about me.
The Hudson Dodds baseball stadium is coming up for sure.
I love it.
Thanks, man. Thank you for having me.
Thanks.